Hi, welcome back to We Free Men, page 66. Remember, she had just dusted the steps because she realized these water buckets were being filled up magically, it seemed like. But no, she dusted the steps and saw two lines of footprints, one leading out of the dairy and one coming back. It was all Tiffany could do to lift one of the heavy wooden buckets when it was full. So obviously, these We Free Men are very, very strong. They can carry big buckets of water around with no problem. So she thought, they are immensely strong as well as being incredibly fast. I'm really being very calm about this. I don't think I would be that calm if small people were moving stuff around in my house. She looked up at the big wooden beams that ran across the room, and a little dust fell down as if something had quickly moved out of the way. I think I ought to put a stop to this right now, she thought. On the other hand, there's no harm in waiting until all the buckets are filled up. And then I'll have to fill the log box in the scullery, she said aloud. Well, it was worth a try. She went back to churning butter, and it didn't bother to turn her head when she heard four more sloshes behind her. Nor did she look around when she heard little whook, 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 whoosh noises and the clatter of logs in the box. She turned only to see when the noise stopped. So she just says jobs out loud, and these We Free Men are doing it for her. Because obviously, they think she's something special. Because she beat Jenny, they have a sense that she is a witch. They kind of know it. The log box was full up to the ceiling, and all the buckets were full. The patch of flour was a mass of footprints. She stopped churning. She had a feeling that eyes were watching her. A lot of eyes. Thank you, she said. No, that wasn't right. She sounded nervous. She let go of the butter paddle and stood up, trying to look as fierce as possible. And what about our sheep? She said. I won't believe you're really sorry until I see the sheep come back. There was a bleating from the paddock. She ran out to the bottom of the garden and looked around through the hedge. The sheep was coming back, backward, at a high speed. It jerked to a halt a little way away from the hedge and dropped down as the little men let it go. One of the red-headed men appeared for a moment on its head. He huffed on a horn, polished it with his kilt, and vanished in a blur. Tiffany walked back to the dairy looking thoughtful. When she got back, the butter had been churned. Not just churned, in fact, but patted into a dozen fat golden oblongs on the marble she used when she did it. There was even a sprig of parsley on each one. And the brownies, she wondered? Oh, are they brownies, she wondered, which is a type of fairy. According to the fairy tales, brownies hung around the house doing chores in exchange for a saucer of milk. But in the picture, they'd been cheery little creatures with long, pointy hoods. The red hairy men didn't look as if they'd ever drunk milk in their lives. But perhaps it was worth a try. Well, she said aloud, still aware of the hidden watchers, that'll do, thank you. I'm glad you're sorry for what you did. She took one of the cat's saucers from a pile by the sink, washed it in the sink, filled it with milk from today's churn, and put it on the floor and stood back. Are you brownies? She said. The air blurred. Milk splashed across the floor, and the saucer spun around and round. I'll take that as a no then, said Tiffany. So what are you? So there was just like milk everywhere. They're not happy with the milk. There were unlimited supplies of no answer at all. She lay down and looked under the sink and then peered between the cheese shelves. She stared up into the dark, spidery shadows of the room. It felt empty. And she thought, I need a whole egg's worth of education in a hurry. Remember, you use eggs to pay the mistick. So she needs a whole egg's worth of education. Tiffany had walked along the steep track from the farm into the village hundreds of times. It was less than a half-mile long, and over the centuries, the carts had worn it down so there was more like a gully in the chalk and ran like a milky stream in wet weather. She was halfway down when the susurrus started. The hedges rustled with the wind. The skylarks stopped singing, and while she hadn't really noticed their song, the silence was a shock. Nothing's louder than the end of a song that's always been there. When she looked up at the sky, it was like looking through a diamond. It sparkled, and the air went cold so quickly that it was like stepping into an icy bath. And there was snow underfoot, snow on the hedges, and the sound of hooves. They were in the field beside her. A horse was galloping through the snow behind the hedge that was now suddenly a wall of white. The hoofbeats stopped. There was a moment of silence, and then the horse landed in the lane, skidding on the snow. It pulled itself upright, and the rider turned it to face Tiffany. The rider himself couldn't face Tiffany. He had no face. He had no head to hang it on. She ran. Her boots slipped on the snow as she moved, but suddenly her mind was cold as ice. She had 2 legs slipping on ice. A horse had twice as many legs to slip. She'd seen horses try to tackle this hill in icy weather. She had a chance. She heard a breathy, whistling noise behind her and a whinny from the horse. She risked a glance. The horse was coming after her, but slowly, half walking and half sliding. Steam poured off of it. About halfway down the slope, the lane passed under an arch of trees, looking like a crashed clouds, now under the weight of snow. And beyond them, Tiffany knew, the lane flattened out. The headless man would catch her on the flat. She didn't know what would happen after that, but if she was sure, it would be unpleasantly short. Flakes of snow dropped on her as she passed under the trees, and she decided to make a run for it. She might reach the village. She was good at running. But if she got there, then what? She'd never reach a door in time, and people would shout and run about. The dark horseman didn't look like someone who'd take much notice of that. No, she had to deal with it. If only she brought the frying pan. "Here we hag. Stand ye still right noo." She stared up. A tiny blue man had poked his head up out of the snow on top of the hedge. "There's a headless horseman after me," she shouted. "Aye, he'll no make it, hinny. Stand ye still. Look him in the eye." "He hasn't got any eyes." "Crivens, are ye a hag or no? Look him in the eyes. He hasn't a got." The blue man disappeared into the snow. Tiffany turned around. The horseman was trotting under the trees now, the horse more certain as the ground leveled. He had a sword in his hand, and he was looking at her with the eyes he didn't have. There was the breathy noise again, which was not good to hear. "The little men are watching me," she thought. "I can't run. Granny Aching wouldn't have run from a thing with no head." So she's drawing strength from her granny. It's good. She folded her arms and glared. The horseman stopped as if puzzled and then urged the horse forward. A blue and red shape, larger than the other little men, dropped out of the trees. He landed on the horse's forehead and between its eyes. He grabbed an ear in each hand. Tiffany heard the man shout, "Here's a face full of dandruff for you, you bogey, courtesy of Big Jan." And then the man hit the horse between the eyes with his head. So he gave it a headbutt. He grabbed the horse's ears and went boom onto the horse. To her amazement, the horse staggered sideways. "All right," shouted the tiny fighter. "Big toughie is ya. One more with feelin'." This time, the horse danced uneasily the other way, and then its back legs slid from under it and it collapsed in the snow. Little blue men erupted from the hedge. The horseman, trying to get to his feet, disappeared under a blue and red storm of screaming creatures and vanished. The snow vanished. The horse vanished. The blue men, for a moment, were a pile in the hot, dusty road. One of them said, "Ah, Crivens, I kicked myself in me own head." And then they too vanished. But for a moment, Tiffany saw blue and red blurs disappearing into the hedge. Then the skylarks were back. The hedges were green and full of flowers. Not a twig was broken, not a flower disturbed. The sky was blue, no flashes of diamond. Tiffany looked down. On the toes of her boots, snow was melting. She was strangely glad about that. It meant that what had just happened was magical, not madness, because if she closed her eyes, she could still hear the wheezy breathing of the headless man. What she needed right now was people and ordinary things happening. But more than anything else, she wanted answers. Actually, what she wanted more than anything else was not to hear the wheezy breathing when she shut her eyes. So some magic creature had showed up, made winter everywhere, and tried to approach her for whatever reason. And the wee free men had defeated it for the time being. The tents had gone, except for a few pieces of broken chalk, apple cores, and some stamped-down grass, and alas, a few chicken feathers. There was nothing at all to show that the teachers had ever been there. A small voice said, "Psst." She looked down. A toad crept out from under a dock leaf. "Miss Tick said you'd be back," it said. "I expect there's some things you need to know, right?" "Yeah, like everything," said Tiffany. "We're swamped with tiny men. I can't understand half of what they say. They keep calling me a hag." "Ah, yes," said the toad. "You've got Knack McFeagles." Knack McFeagles. I'm going to write that on the board because it's a good word. It's a good word to know. Knack McFeagles. That's the Knack McFeagles, okay? That's what the wee free men call themselves. They're the Knack-McFeagles. You've got Knack-McFeagles, said the toad. I'm sorry, he's not a frog. It snowed, and then it hadn't. I was chased by a horseman with no head, and one of the, what did you say they were? Knack-McFeagles, said the toad, also known as pixies. They call themselves the wee free men. I guess they call themselves wee free men, not Knack-McFeagles. Well, one of them headbutted the horse, and it fell over. It was a huge horse, too. Ah, that sounds like a feagle, said the toad. I gave them some milk, and they tipped it over. You gave the Knack-McFeagle milk? Gee, the toad can't believe it. Well, you said they were pixies. Not pixies, pixies. Okay, here's the difference now. She thinks pixies, this little fairy creature who might like milk, but he says, no, they're pixies. And a pict is a traditional word for a Scottish person, a Scottish tribal person. So they're pixies, a little different. Not pixies, pixies. And they certainly don't drink milk. Are they from the same place as Jenny? Tiffany demanded. No, they're rebels, said the toad. Rebels against who? Against everyone? Against anything, said the toad. Now pick me up. Why? Because there's a woman at the well over there giving you a funny look. Put me in your apron pocket, for goodness sake. Tiffany snatched up the toad and smiled at the woman. I'm making a collection of pressed toads, she said. Oh, that's nice, dear, said the woman, and hurried away. Because the woman saw Tiffany talking to this toad and was like, hey, what's going on? That wasn't very funny, said the toad from her apron. People don't listen anyway, said Tiffany. She sat down under the tree and took the toad out of her pocket. The Feagles tried to steal some of our eggs and one of our sheep, she said, but I got them back. You got something back from the Knack-McFeagle? Said the toad. Were they ill? No, they were a bit, well, sweet, actually. They even did chores for me. The Feagle did chores? Said the toad. They never do chores. They're not helpful at all. And then there was the headless horseman, said Tiffany. He had no head. Well, that is their major job qualification, said the toad. What's going on, Toad, said Tiffany. Is it the Feagles who are invading? The toad looked a bit shifty. Miss Tick doesn't really want you to handle this, she said. She'll be back soon with help. Is she going to be in time? Tiffany demanded. I don't know, probably, but you shouldn't. I want to know what's happening. Well, she's gone to get some other witches, said the toad. She doesn't think you should. You'd better tell me what you know, Toad, said Tiffany. Miss Tick isn't here. I am. Okay, another world is colliding with this one, said the toad. Here, happy now? That's what Miss Tick thinks. But it's happening faster than she expected. All the monsters are coming back. Why? Well, there's no one to stop them. There was silence for a moment. There's me, said Tiffany. And that's where we'll stop. I love that section where the toad can't believe that the Feagle did chores and they brought things back. Obviously, the Feagle think Tiffany is something special, even if Toad and Miss Tick don't. Anyway, that's all we got for today. Enjoy. We'll be back next time with chapter 4 is entitled The Wee Free Men.